This is step one on how to build a candle in ceramics. What we're going to do is we're going to start with a solid chunk of clay, and you're first going to start just forming the general shape of your outside object that you want for your candle. I'm going to go with a rattlesnake head, so I'm going to take some time to just kind of push the clay and morph it into the general shape that I want. I'm at this point now where I'm starting to get a rattlesnake head, this being the base of the neck and this being like the tip of the mouth area. So I'm starting to get the shape. I'm keeping my phone open literally just to a rattlesnake head Google search, and it's just helping me kind of see all sides of the rattlesnake head to kind of get the form sorted out. So what I'm doing as far as forming it is any areas that I kind of want to shape them inward just slightly, I'm kind of taking my hand and just kind of tapping that area. It helps to kind of know the different areas and the different firmnesses of your hand. Areas that are more bony are going to have a more intense effect on where you're pounding in the shape of that area. Areas that are softer, like right in here, will have a lighter effect. And then of course the very center of your palm kind of curves inward, so that's really good for just kind of fine tuning an area and kind of just getting a nice smooth rounded area to it. If you want to make a really flat area, or maybe a really, really harsh change, like if I wanted these two sides to come in with a nice, perfectly flat edge, which I already kind of did, you can carefully tap that on the table and it'll make it really flattened and really sharp, and maybe even give you some points on the sides of it. Because I'm dealing with a natural form, I'm not really going to do a whole lot of that. But if you're dealing with a more geometric form, usually something that's more man-made, you might do more of the tapping on the table than I am. Since mine is an organic object, I'm spending a lot of time just tapping it in with my hands. Again, my first step is to really get the overall shape really fine-tuned. There's going to be some things that I'm going to be carving out and adding on. I'm going to spend a lot of time dealing with the scales, but I'm also going to be adding on those like eyelid protrusions that come out of it, probably right around here. And I'm going to be kind of scooping out where the mouth goes and stuff like that. But right now I'm just trying to get the basic shape. Again, I can add and subtract clay later. I'm just getting my basic form kind of figured out. I've now finished getting the basic shape for my rattlesnake's head. The image shown here shows that their face is pretty flat, but because this is going to be a candle, if it was too flat, the amount of space to hold wax would be really, really small. So I made his head a little taller, a little chunkier, so that way I'll at least have a decent amount of space to hold some wax in here. Now what I'm going to do is to start attaching clay, carving in clay, really kind of laying out my design, and getting some basic main features in on this. I've started just kind of laying out some of the main features that I'm going to be dealing with. I put in the 2 nostrils on each side. I know that's weird, but it's a thing. I also put in kind of where I plan to place the eyeballs. So I kind of looked at the top views, the side views, made sure it all looked correct. And again, I also kind of threw in the mouth area. Again, in reality, their lower jaw is much smaller, and it would honestly probably give it more of a rattlesnake kind of look. But for the sake of having a candle, I kept the lower jaw kind of large because I planned to have the mouth opening be where the top part of the lid comes off. So I've scooped out the eye socket area. I've kind of started cleaning up a bit more of the nostrils, and I realized I had to get some clay to actually make the eyeballs and make the eyebrow area, and I didn't have extra clay, so I kind of carved some out the back of his head because I feel like that's an area where I could have lost some more clay and not had an issue with it. And I've got it right here. It was a little on the dry side just from being on the outer edge. So what I did is I took a little bit of my slip and I tapped it on this little bit of clay, and I started kind of mushing and kneading and wedging it in. Also because small pieces of clay like this, they dry out really, really, really quickly. So especially if you're trying to mold tiny pieces of clay, it helps if it's a little soft and a little kind of on the gummy side. I've attached in the eyeballs, and I've just scored and slipped down the eyebrows more or less. So I will say that the small pieces of clay absolutely dry out super, super quick. So while I was forming the eyebrows and the eyeballs, I had some slip on my fingers fingers just so my hands themselves didn't dry out the clay. Make sure your slip is looking proper. Gosh, I wish I had better lighting for this. It should be liquidy enough where it's like pourable. It shouldn't be like a super thick paste. So if you need to add water to your slip, go for it. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna actually kind of mold and form the eyebrows so they look a little bit more natural. I blended in the eyebrows and the eyes. You can tell that it's still texture-wise pretty rough. Let me try to focus on it a bit more. It's still kind of rough, but the thing is my clay is like super soft right now, so getting surface textures absolutely perfect is somewhat impossible. I'm best off waiting to really do all those fine details of smoothing that out and adding in the scales once my project is a little more dry. For the most part, your goal is to completely design your entire outside, and then you're going to slice your project in half, relatively half. Because my clay's a little soft and I know I'm going to be wrecking my scales if I do my scales and then I slice it, I'm going to do a slightly different method. If a slightly different order of steps works for you too, you're welcome to mix up the steps. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm now going to slice this into 2 pieces. All right, so I did it. His mouth can now open. So if you're gonna just cut your project straight through, like a nice straight line, and you can probably do that with a wire cutter that we use to cut clay. If you have a more of an organic line, like I had a unique curve going along the sides, and I had this point in the front, then you're going to want to kind of draw out your initial line by scooping it out by hand with any sort of tool you can. And then, you know, whatever tool you have is only gonna go so deep, so you can't just pull it off right away. At that point, you're gonna wanna switch to something that can carve in deeper, like sometimes maybe a rib tool or even like a butter knife to really get that clay on the inside. It really doesn't matter how rough the clay on the inside is, but the goal is that when you cut it off, you don't ruin your outside edging too much. You keep your edging nice and perfect. It'll line up really, really easily. I'm going to carefully start scooping out the clay for the top and the bottom. I'm going to be careful though, because since my clay is still pretty damp, it's susceptible to kind of change its shape. If it changes its shape too much, it will no longer line up well. I started scooping out the inside. What I also wanted to show you is this right here. You see that little divot? That little tiny hole in there, as I was scooping away the clay, it appeared. What that is an air pocket. So that's the reason why we never want our clay thicker than, you know, like half an inch or so, is because the thicker your clay is, the more likely there's gonna be little air pockets. As we know, those air pockets could cause explosions in the kiln. So by scooping out this top part of his head, I am starting to get out the air pocket. Sorry, this cat has like no boundaries. So now that I've done like the majority of my scooping, you get to the point where your clay starts getting on the thinner side. Right now my clay is probably a little over half an inch thick. At this point, I'm really emphasizing evenness of the clay wall. So I'm trying to make it to where it's an even 1/4 of an inch thick throughout. As a reminder, 1/4 of an inch is about as thick as a pencil. So occasionally I'll kind of check the thickness in various areas by having one finger on the inside, one finger on the outside, and I can kind of see between my nails how thick that area is. I can still carve a lot down in that area. Ideally, I'm going to get it to be about that thick, which is between my nails.